if you make choices, and I like to remind everybody, and especially women, that no is a complete sentence. You can just say no when people ask you to do things. I've gotten better at it with children. They've been a convenient excuse, but I wish I had worked on it more even before children. To just say, you know, someone offers you to do something, I'm sorry, I can't. Not I can't because blah, 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 just so sorry. No.
Yep.
And so, you know, that's a muscle that you have to work out. You have to learn to flex it. It is not easy for any of us. We all want to be nice and accommodating and achieve. But sometimes if you say yes to so many things, you actually can do nothing. So making choices about what you do with your time is critical. And that means you won't do everything at the same time. If you want to write a book, but you also want to do X, Y, or Z right now, you might pick one for this season. I've heard people refer to seasons. You're not making a forever choice, but in this season, you can do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah. All right. So, Dr. Linda Drozdowicz, did I pronounce that properly? The last name? Good. Perfect. All right. So I'll just do like a quick introduction of who you are. Linda is a Yale-trained certified child and adult psychiatrist that takes a holistic approach towards mental health. As a musician herself, she gravitates towards people that gravitates towards the arts, which is something very interesting for us for this conversation, thinking about arts and science. And yeah, we're very excited to have you here to talk about motivation. We've had a discussion before, and I just thought, you know, it'll be valuable to our community of storytellers. So to tell you a bit about the community, it's called Storytellers Lounge. It's a community of multifaceted professionals that want to write, want to make music as a tool to tell their stories to the world. So, you know, as you can imagine with anything, storytelling, making music, going to med school, starting a business, you need a lot of motivation. And I've personally experienced that as I've written 2 books now, and people ask me, how do you stay motivated? And I really don't have a sense of what it is. So I've always been very curious to what's the science behind motivation. So if you don't mind doing, I tried with the introduction, you know, obviously based on our convos and what I've read, but if you don't mind giving your introduction to the community.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, hi guys, I'm Linda Drozdowicz. I tell everybody that I could have dropped that name when I got married, but I didn't because I make poor choices. So I'm a child and adult psychiatrist. I'm based out in Connecticut, but I also work in New York. And my background is that I grew up in Connecticut, went to the University of Connecticut for undergrad. I went to the Mayo Clinic for medical school, which I was very lucky to get to go there. And that's where I met my friend Chica, who was a friend of Nefemi's. I did my adult psychiatry residency at Mount Sinai Hospital, where I was a chief resident. And then I did my child and adolescent psychiatry fellowship at Yale Child Study Center, where I'm still on faculty. And I've also got a private practice. And speaking of building businesses, you know, just this week I'm merging with a colleague, and I've got the business stuff on the mind, my goodness. But I'm also a human being. So I, you know, before I did any of this medical sciencey stuff, I was a musician. I sang in a wonderful professional girls choir starting from age 8 or something like that, all through high school, hours and hours every week. And music has always been a big part of my life. And it's a part of my life that persists even in my practice. I work with music and connect with kids and adults over music. I am a mother. I have 2 young kids. I've got a 4-year-old and a 7-month-old. Husband, 2 dogs, you know, a little crappy house, living the dream. I really am living the dream. I'm enjoying myself. So that is who I am. And I've got a big sense of humor. And I think, I mean, that's just culturally how I come from Jewish people, and we use humor for everything. Even when things are bad, if you can't laugh, you've got nothing. So that's sort of who I am. So I'm happy to talk to you guys today and answer questions that you might have.
Perfect. Thank you for your time. And so the format for this is, you know, I'll just ask a few questions around motivation, some of your personal stories. It'll take about 20, 30 minutes. And afterwards, we'll open it up to anybody that has any questions. And I will employ anybody in the um, meeting right now to type in your questions in the chat, and we can take that up as we go. So, Linda, tell me more. You know, the first time we spoke, right? I remember you telling me about med school and music, right? And I was just thinking how, like, you know, one of the hardest things that I feel people go through academically is med school, right? I was just like, how do y'all do it, right? So
Yeah.
I was just fascinated when you told me about med school and then also making time to make music. So do you mind telling me the journey from, you know, the choir, then going into med school, and you know why with the music?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I sang in the choir through high school. And then when I went to college, I wasn't local anymore. And so I did college a cappella, very tacky, I know, but that was the thing to do. So I sang with an a cappella group. And then when I got to med school, the week before med school, I went on vacation with my parents as a one last hurrah to Hawaii. My dad was going to some conference there. So we went, and I got pneumonia. I got sick. I couldn't do anything. And in the hotel gift shop, there was this ukulele painted like a watermelon. I didn't play any instruments. I only sang, but I bought it just as a thing. And I said, I'll hang it up in my new apartment and in Minnesota for med school. And I got to medical school and I said, I'm going to be, excuse my French, balls to the wall, focusing, studying hard, no time for nonsense. And I really didn't plan to incorporate music into what I was doing because I had gotten this ticket into this amazing med school and I felt like a fraud. And I said, oh my God, I have to, I can't do anything fun. And it was a total disaster. The first block at Mayo is anatomy. You do only anatomy for 7 weeks straight. You dissect the full human body in groups of 4. And it turns out anatomy was my kryptonite. I'm not great with words, with memorizing random names, and I don't have great visual spatial skills. So anatomy was literally the worst possible thing to start with. And it was going horribly. I was sleeping, 3-4 hours a night, studying constantly, not doing very well. And I was convinced I was going to fail out of medical school and that they made a mistake accepting me. And Mayo was a class of only 42. I call it kindergarten for adults. And so everyone knew us. And one day, one of the secretaries said, Linda, I noticed you crying in the street. So the dean is waiting for you in the office. And I said, oh boy. And I went to the dean and he said, what's going on? And I said, listen, I'm not sleeping. All I do is study. It's like, I don't belong here. You made a mistake taking me. And he started to laugh. Not in a mean way. And he said, we didn't make a mistake taking you. He goes, anatomy has nothing to do with practicing medicine. This is just the first block. And he said, what do you do for fun? And I said, nothing. I said, I study. And he said, what did you used to do for fun? And I said, music. I've always done music. And he said, well, then you need to do music. And I said, are you insane? I said, I don't have enough time as it is. He goes, you're not going to fail out. We don't fail people here. He goes, that's not going to happen to you. And he said, you need to do more music. And so I plucked the ukulele off the wall and I started teaching myself to play. And my classmates were wonderfully supportive and I really wasn't good. I could sing, but I really couldn't play for a long time. But they encouraged me and eventually I could play enough to back up singing, and it turned into, an hour concert every week in the middle of the Mayo Clinic lobby for all the patients. And I did that for years. And then I became known as the ukulele girl, and it changed my life. It changed my life to be told it was okay, to continue to make time for myself, even as a quote unquote adult, because I think in some way I associated art and creativity with my childhood. And now I had to be a big bad doctor. And it turned out that that plan was not even feasible. And that without art and music, I couldn't do it. And everything got better once I brought the music back in.
Wow, that's interesting. So even I think it's interesting that who is this, the dean of
Yeah,
the
the dean of
school?
the medical school.
Wow, like I'll say that's a different mindset where they kind of give you the permission to be like, focus on other things, right?
Right.
Where, for me, when I remember, well, the last major institution I was in was business school. And, I don't think, someone was pulling me to the side and say, hey, Nefemi, that music you're making is very
Yeah.
important for your, well, I say livelihood. And I had to take that, on myself to say, I have to
Yeah.
make music for myself to kind of balance out the other side. So it's interesting. Would you say it's important to have that environment for people to, will I say, encourage you or give permission in terms of achieving your goals?
Absolutely. I mean, I said Mayo is a special place. I drink the Kool-Aid big time. I don't think most med schools would have given that advice, but that dean he knew that it wasn't a matter, I did very well in medical school in the end. I did, and I'm a psychiatrist. I don't use anatomy. The brain's up here. That's what I know of anatomy, but I learned what I needed to know. So I think having someone in a position of power turn to me and say, no, do your music, do what makes you happy, almost take it like medicine. I mean, that's kind of how he described it. You have to do it to be okay. And so I think, even if someone is at an institution or in a training where, the leadership there is not so supportive, we can all be that more quote unquote senior support, more experienced to support, to turn to someone and say, not only is it okay for you to, enrich those parts of you, it's critical. It's critical. You have to take it like medicine. You have to, like, you have to do it to be a whole person.
Yeah. So can you tell me, is there any, will I say, science behind why, as human beings, we are, some of us have different sides to ourselves, right? And if you're going to work, sometimes you have to block off certain sides to focus on work, or be more productive, right? And the more I talk to people, I find that people that allow themselves to bring all different sides have more, will I say, enjoyable or maybe somewhat more meaningful lives. Is that something, is there science behind this, or is this, what would you say, what spurs us to kind of want to do different things that we're interested in?
So I'd say there's science, and then there's whatever you want to call it. Not necessarily spiritual. I'll call it more philosophical. There's the science, and then there's like life. I sometimes call it, Jewish grandma wisdom, but everyone's grandma has the wisdom, right? So, in my family it was the Jewish grandma, but I think all grandmas know the same stuff. So, the science is that it's good to give parts of your brain a rest to recharge. So we often talk about left brain, right brain, but there's so much more to the compartmentalization of different parts of the brain. As I'm a left-handed person, which I always have thought is sort of interesting, and how I sort of experience the world a little different than the right-handers, but we all experience the world in a unique way. And so if you are working on the analytical, doing a task that's like that, to take a break and then do something more philosophical, more artistic, more whatever, you're giving that part of your brain a break and truly letting it recharge. So it's not sleep, but it is a break. So scientifically, it makes sense to sort of take a break, compartmentalize what you're doing, and let yourself recharge. Then there's the life stuff. And this is stuff that I was told, by grandma, by other women. So questions such as, does it make sense to have children when you have a crazy career? I mean, that might seem like a crazy question, but it's not, because on paper, children don't make any sense. They're the most irrational decision a person can make. I'm in the thick of it. They take all of your money, all of your time, all of your sleep. There's no guarantee that they'll take care of you when they're older. And I don't think it's really fair to put that on them, right? So you might get nothing in return. Maybe they'll hate you. Children make no sense. But that's what makes life rich, right? It's one of the sorts of things, like art, like music, that makes life rich. And I don't know that you can put, a price on that or anything else, but there's never a good time. I don't think there's ever a good time for art or music or writing, but you make time because it enriches your life. At the end of your life, no one's sitting there counting the dollars you made or how many hours you worked or high-fiving you because you didn't take all your vacation days, right? So that's the more philosophical aspects of, you make the time. Make the time, and then it somehow does seem to work. I mean, I've got 2 children, but somehow I'm getting all of my shit done. Excuse my French. That's how but and in fact, I think I've gotten more efficient because I know that I'm going to make time for my guitar lesson. I'm going to make time to sit there with my toddler, and let him blow bubbles at me and, scream or whatever, but I will be there with him. And so it seems to not make things worse. And then philosophically, your life is so much richer.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, because sometimes when I'm talking to people and I'm saying like, okay, I wrote a book, I'm running my business, and I just released this mixtape, the first thing a lot of people say is like, oh wow, you must have so much time on your hand. Almost in the kind of like, I'm doing serious things. You must have all this time. And for me, it's like, okay, we all have 24 hours, right? I know it's more about making the time, right? So I know there's a book I read Julia Cameron, which is the Artist's Way, where there's this exercise called morning pages, where you just sit down every morning and write like 2 pages, right? And during an interview, they asked her, like, doesn't that take up your time in the morning? And she's like, no, she feels like after she does it, it actually gives her more time because now she has cleared out all the stuff in her head. And then the days just seems a lot more, you can do a lot more. How do you advise people or tell people to make time for the things you want to do?
Yeah, so I like to be careful about this because telling people to make time for anything, they do this to us all the time in medicine. Doctors are burnt out and they say, make time to meditate. What time? So you don't want to victim blame. But instead of saying make time, I say make choices. So at that beginning of medical school, when I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't doing well, I started to get depressed. I made a radical decision, especially for a medical student. I made a radical decision that I'd never done before. And I decided to sleep 8 hours a night. And I did that throughout, aside from when I was scheduled for 24-hour shifts, I did that for all of medical school, and I've done it since. I have not compromised, unless it's absolutely impossible. I sleep 8 hours a night. And you might say, well, make time for that. Making time is a lot of doing, but just making a choice. I will sleep. I will put down what I'm doing and go to sleep. You cannot hurt yourself by sleeping adequately. Sometimes people have this idea of if I just sleep less, I can take off there's lots of science behind what happens to your body and your mind when you are chronically underslept. Not sleeping enough is the same as being drunk. It has the same effect on driving. It really is bad for you. It makes you less efficient. It makes you less happy. It makes you gain weight. It makes you do all these things. So if you make choices, and I like to remind everybody, and especially women, that no is a complete sentence. You can just say no when people ask you to do things. I've gotten better at it with children. They've been a convenient excuse, but I wish I had worked on it more even before children. To just say, someone offers you to do something. I'm sorry, I can't. Not I can't because blah, blah, blah. Just so sorry. No. Yep. And so, that's a muscle that you have to work out. You have to learn to flex it. It is not easy for any of us. We all want to be nice and accommodating and achieve. But sometimes if you say yes to so many things, you actually can do nothing. So making choices about what you do with your time is critical. And that means you won't do everything at the same time. If you want to write a book, but you also want to do X, Y, or Z right now, you might pick one for this season. I've heard people refer to seasons. You're not making a forever choice, but in this season, you can do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you will do a better job. You need to sleep. You need to make time to exercise. And I say that as someone who hates to exercise, but you have to. The first time Nefemi and I spoke, I was walking while we spoke, and I try to take meetings while I walk if I can, like to try to build that stuff in. But make choices about what you do and try to get rid of guilt. Just try to say, you know what, I sleep at these hours. And it is a radical thing to do. And I encourage you, if you're not doing that, to give it a try. Because it really will change how you approach your life if you just are able to start giving yourself enough respect to make time to sleep. I think a lot of people don't.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks for saying that, because even recently what I started doing was like at the end of the night, I just put my phone on airplane mode. And so that when I wake up, I'm just not bombarded by emails and text messages from clients and everything. And it's just a way for me to say, this is my time now, right? And obviously I've gotten some pushback, like, why would you put your phone on this? What if someone wants to contact you? But this is me making a decision of, this is how I want my time or my space to be built around so I can do other things. And the last time we spoke, you said something that I've just kept in mind is about motivation, right? Motivation, just as you said, is a choice, and it's all about decision making, right? Can you expand more on that? And even if you can maybe tell us the story about, during COVID, you talked about taking classes with one of your favorite musicians and how, you make that decision and maybe motivation is about showing up and all that.
Okay, sure. And before I answer that, just on your note about the airplane mode, I do the same thing. Highly recommend that at night. And if you want to be really old school, which I ended up being, buy a $10 alarm clock off Amazon. Me and my husband, I made him do it, have alarm clocks on our nightstand and leave your phone outside your room.
Yes.
Don't even have the temptation there. Go plug it in elsewhere. It's amazing. It's amazing. And if you have worries about, like, what if family can't contact me, buy a burner phone and only give the number to your parents. I'm serious. I mean, you're not you don't need a good plan or something, like, just so highly recommend compartmentalizing, because we are all bombarded constantly with stimulation and with people needing us. They have their sticky fingers all over you, and you just have to turn it off. So that's great. So okay, so motivation, the music. So where do I start? You want me to talk about the music thing?
Yeah, tell us about the interest in COVID, and then
so for me, like with literally everyone else in the world, everything blew up with COVID. Thank God I didn't get terribly sick, and no one I know died, which is rare, but it was a tough time. We all got switched to work from home. I had a young child. I don't think I mentioned this in your family, but I actually, as COVID hit, I was in the middle of an ectopic pregnancy, like an extended miscarriage, basically, which took like 8 months and was horrible. So there was a lot going on. And I had previously had tickets to go see my favorite band play. My favorite quote unquote rock stars is a bluegrass band. And their tour got canceled, as did all musicians. And I said, everything is horrible. I was, feeling low. And so I just went on Google and tried to search out the email of the lead singer and guitarist. And I said, I'm going to be a little creepy here, but I'm going to try to find it. And I did find it. I found an email. I assumed it was old. I assumed I wouldn't ever be able to reach her, but I sent an email basically saying, hi, I'm a big fan. I promise I'm not a serial killer. Do you give lessons? I said, I saw your tour was canceled. Do you give lessons? And honestly, my husband encouraged me to do it, because I said, that's so weird. Like, that is so weird to do that. And he said, what do you have to lose? Who cares? And I did it. And she responded. And she said, actually, like, I've never given lessons before, but I guess we could try. And so I started doing Zoom lessons with my favorite musician, and I am still doing them now, like 2.5 years later. It's not weekly anymore because she's on tour again, but whenever she's home, we do it. And I've gotten to meet the whole band, and like, I'm kind of friends with her. And like, so I just, I got the motivation to do it by saying everything is shit. And I like music, kind of like in med school, and why not? Right? Like, what if you don't ask, you'll never find out, what's going to happen. So that's, again, I decided, even though I felt so busy and so overwhelmed, I said, incorporating music is what makes things better. So that hour per week, I'd probably spend normally doom scrolling on Facebook or something. So I can't lie to myself and say I don't have time.
True. Exactly. I'm sorry, what's the name of the band? Just in case.
Oh yeah, I mean, no one likes bluegrass except me, but the band is Della Mae, Della space Mae. They are just, excuse my French, fucking awesome. It's an all-female bluegrass band, and they are amazing musicians.
Nice. Everybody check them out. The lead singer is generous enough to
That's
send
right.
random emails and willing to teach.
Yeah.
And how did that go?
Yeah.
How did that process go? Were you just excited every day, every time to get on this call, or how did you keep going?
Yes, we talked about that. So even though I love the lessons, all the time I feel exhausted and overwhelmed with my work. And there were so many times I was like, oh, I should just cancel my lesson. I can't today. I make myself do it. And this is something I advise patients on in therapy. If you're having trouble motivating yourself to do something, you need to take almost like an AA approach, Alcoholics Anonymous, where they're famous for saying one day at a time when it comes to sobriety. I say one moment at a time. So if I'm feeling like I can't do guitar today, I don't have time, I have 50 things to do, I'm exhausted, I would rather have a nap, I say, well, I have to turn on the Zoom. I have to show up to the lesson. Because once you show up, that is more than half the battle. When I talk to people who are having trouble motivating themselves to go to the gym, I say, no problem. Pack up your shit and drive to the gym. And you don't even have to go in.
Mhm.
If you just drive there or walk there, that's all I ask of you. Because once you do that, you'll go in, you'll do something. And so it's not expecting yourself to go run on the treadmill for 45 minutes. That's too much to think about. Just get there. And usually our brains and our bodies take care of the rest. But to kind of get over the hump, just show up. That is most of the battle, is
Mhm.
showing up, the activation energy.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
And connected to that is, I guess, setting realistic goals, right?
Yes.
So when I think of, for instance, in the storytellers lounge, a lot of people, some people want to write books, and they ask me like, how do you do it? And the reality is I never really set out to write a book to
Right.
start with. I started with music. I wanted a short story. The short story turned into a few pages. A few
Yeah.
pages turned into chapters, and it kind of trickled down from there. One thing I learned, and it's a process I'm taking now, is more of breaking it down into small steps, right? So if I need 25,000 words and I want to do this over 3 months, I need 8,000 words a month. Per week, or per week I need 2,000 words. Per day I need 500. And you
Right.
could literally like 500 words in 20 minutes a day, right?
Right.
So it doesn't take too much time. Um, how do you advise people in terms of setting achievable goals?
Yeah. So you want to set goals that you can achieve. I mean, just as Nafemi said. So the deal is, when we set big goals, we set ourselves up for disappointment. And I like to tell everyone, it's fresh on my mind, but if you've ever interacted with little kids, the key is to set them up to succeed. If you have a school child, this happens all the time in kids with ADHD, with attention deficit disorder, which is something I help kids with all the time, where they're in school and the teacher says, write me a story, and the kid sees a squirrel out the window and they're distracted and they don't do it, and then they feel like a moron, and the teacher treats them like a moron. And the biggest problem with ADD and ADHD is not the attention problems, and it's not the academic achievement, because that can all be fixed very easily. The problem is they end up with low self-esteem and they think they're morons, and that is much harder to fix, right? We are all the same as little kids, even as adults. And so if we set goals that are unrealistic, that we can't meet, we give up. I hate exercise. And there have been times in med school during that anatomy block, I gained 20 pounds because I ate a pound of Indian food every day after anatomy to self-medicate. Okay. It was a disaster. And I've never been an exerciser, but I said, I can't, I'm 5 feet tall. Gaining 20 pounds is a big deal. I need to lose this weight. And so I didn't say I'm going to start running because I hate running. I said, I have to go to the gym every day. And I started doing that. And 8 weeks later, the 20 pounds were gone, because I did not make an expectation of I will go on the treadmill for 45 minutes, which is what I did. And all I did was walking. I really hate to run. So I said that I'm not running, because if I say I have to run, I'll never go again. So I just walked and it went away. So you have to set small, achievable goals, make boxes you can check. I am such a fan of lists and checklists. And you want to make it, what's an example? I just got some hospital bill from my child's birth 8 months ago that they didn't send me. It's a big bill. They didn't bill the insurance. I'm sure I'm going to have to talk to 15 different people to get this resolved. So if I make a checkbox that says, take care of bill,
It's
it's
not
going to have to be call Stanford Hospital, call Aetna Insurance, call whatever. Because then I'll actually feel good about myself as I'm going through it. Because otherwise they're going to say, I'll deal with this next month. Right. So you have to set smaller goals and more of them, and you'll be more likely to actually follow through, because we all want to feel good about ourselves. That's what motivates us.
Mm-hmm. So, but in that case, just to add more to that, how do you then, like, one thing I know over the last 7 years of trying to run my own business, you have to keep yourself accountable. You get everything from advice of, don't try and do more than 3 tasks, or set 3 tasks a day, so that it's easy to follow. Other times I'm just like putting the whole list down the night before so that I can do it. It does feel good when you go through the checklist.
Right.
When you don't, sometimes you now have to push yourself, which might not be the most healthy thing. How do you develop this self-awareness to know like what you're capable of doing? Because I think that takes time, where you're like, is this goal, is it too small? Are you not pushing yourself, or am I doing too much? How do you
Right.
get that awareness?
Yeah. you got to check in with yourself and you have to be honest with yourself. I think the hardest thing is having like, disgustingly honest conversations with ourselves. And just acknowledging where you're at, because there's what you can do, but then there's what you're kind of actually capable of doing at a given time. I could do lots of things. In college, I used to study for 18 hours straight. I could do it. I was a beast. Now I've got 2 kids. I can't do that now. Technically, I'm capable, but in my actual life that I'm living, I can't. And it's okay. I think it's important to sort of talk to yourself and not only acknowledge what you can and can't do, but give yourself grace and even a little love, God forbid, and say, not only is it okay, it's great. It's great. In this season of my life, whatever you have going on, this is what works for me. Not even what I can do. This is what works. Because you also want to leave some time to, I don't know, have a second to be bored. I mean, none of us ever get to be bored. That's really important. It's important for creativity to not just have yourself scheduled so much every second of the day. So, being honest with yourself, being graceful with yourself, and just, not overdoing it. Not when we overdo it, you burn out. That's what happens.
Okay. Thanks. That's great advice. And, the last thing I want to touch on before we go into some of the other questions from the other members here, you talked about behavioral activation. I wrote this down last time. Can you tell me more about that? It's part of the grandma's wisdom, but this one you said is peer reviewed. There's some science behind that. Can you just tell us more about behavioral activation?
So behavioral activation is totally grandma wisdom, but it's actually part of the most evidence-based type of psychotherapy we have, which is called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. So the grandma wisdom version of it is that, if a grandma's hanging out with a grandkid and the grandkid is looking sad, right? Grandma might say to you, smile, you'll feel better. Take that frown off your face, smile, you'll feel better. That is totally backed up by evidence. So what behavioral activation is that, we all know that our feelings affect our behaviors, right? So if you're feeling sad, you might lie in bed, not get up, not get yourself, get your teeth brushed and getting clean clothes, and you might lie there like a slob and whatever. So the sad feelings make you behave a certain way. What is less intuitive, but very much true, is that our behaviors impact our feelings. So the opposite is true, which is that if you're feeling pretty good, but then you just lie around in bed and don't get up, don't get dressed, whatever, you're actually more likely to feel a little bit down and depressed. And the opposite is true. If you're feeling down and depressed, but you get yourself to get up, get dressed, shower, start doing what you normally do, your mood is likely to lift. And that's similar to when you make yourself smile. If all of you right now force yourselves to smile, you might actually be overcome with a little bit of positive feelings, because your brain associates smiling with positive feelings. Even though we're all theoretically right now focusing on what I'm saying in my dreams, you might all be doing other things, but if you're focusing, you might be feeling kind of serious and focused. But if you actually smile, you're going to feel positive. So that's that grandma wisdom aspect, which is that doing things that you usually associate with feeling good or being productive actually causes you to become more that way in the moment. It's not magic. It's not like you can take a person with clinical depression and say, smile, and they're not depressed anymore. But something we do with clinically depressed people is say, what used to make you happy? Because part of depression is something called anhedonia, hedonism, meaning you can't experience joy. Even things that used to make you feel joyful, you feel nothing, even with loved ones. And so what we do is we say, what did you used to like? And they might say, I used to like going to the coffee shop down the street and sitting and whatever. And I say, you have to do that 3 times this week, but I know, and you're not going to enjoy it, but you have to go. Because when you get people going and doing the things that used to make them feel positive, they end up getting better faster. There's a lot of data behind that. So similarly for productivity and motivation, Nifemi's saying, like, what if you just don't feel like writing that day? Say, well, I have to sit down with a pen in my hand and a piece of paper or the computer. I just have to sit down. And even if nothing comes out, fine. Self-acceptance. You don't want to pressure yourself like an overbearing parent, but just say, like, I'm just going to sit because this is typically how I produce, how I create. So that's called behavioral activation. It's extremely evidence-based and it works.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So now we have about 20 more minutes. There are a few questions that have come in. I'll ask a few and then I'll just open it up for everyone to come in and ask their own questions. And feel free to unmute yourself at this point. Ege asked, do you know why we don't do what we say we want to do, even though we end up enjoying it when we start? And these are our personal goals.
So that is a complicated question and something that someone might kind of parse out in a real therapy relationship. The truth is it's different for all of us. There can be so many reasons we don't do what we know we want to do or what we know will, help us feel successful or happy. And it can range from you not actually being capable of doing the things you want in this season. So it can be, that I say, I want to exercise every day. I do. I hate exercise, but I want to. I know it's good for me. But in this season, I'm not sleeping as much as I want to because I've got a baby and a kid waking me up multiple times per night. So, I might not be doing it because I physically feel too exhausted. It's not the right time. You might not be doing something because you have conflicted feelings about it that are under the surface. So I always talk about sort of the forebrain, the front of our brain. That's what makes us different from monkeys, right? We have frontal lobes that help us regulate and sort of control ourselves and emotionally connect in these really complex ways. But then there's what I call the reptile brain in the back, we crudely say it's for feeding, fighting, and love making, right? That's what the reptile brain is for. It's the really basic functions of life, right? And there's feelings that are more in this area that are a little bit hairier than the feelings up here. So up here you might be thinking like, I want to be a brain surgeon. Everyone always wanted me to be a brain surgeon. It's going to be great. I'll make money. I'll help people, whatever. And back here might be the feelings that you're not really wanting to think about of, my dad pressured me to be a brain surgeon and I really wanted to be a singer. But you might not even know those feelings are there. It's so uncomfortable. The feelings that tend to be uncomfortable are aggressive feelings and sexual feelings and feelings against our parents. That's what tends to kind of, and they're not actually physically located back there, but that's how I think about it with people. It's the feelings that we don't want to go there, right? Like I don't want to feel mad at my parents who I love and who sacrificed for me, but that's a really common thing that people experience, which is that, your parents or your family of origin or the influences in your life pressured you or are pressuring you a certain way, and you want to be a good little girl or a good little boy and do exactly what they have wanted from you, but it's not right. And that's why sometimes, if someone is gay, maybe they don't say anything until they're 30 because it takes them that long to kind of acknowledge that they're not going to be the good little boy or girl their mommy and daddy wanted, with 15 grandkids and what, right? And so, the uncomfortable feelings can get in the way. And it's a thing to think about and reflect on with yourself. What is getting in the way? Am I just tired? Am I just overwhelmed and there's not enough time right now? Or am I setting goals that I don't actually like, that my true self does not want? And those are deep questions, right? That's the philosophical stuff. That's stuff you can talk about with a therapist, with a good friend, with clergy, like whoever it is who you feel you can connect with. But that's the tough stuff is, are you kind of self-actualizing for you, or are you self-actualizing for Uncle Joe who always wanted to know a doctor at Harvard?
Yeah. That makes sense. And do you have any tips on how to like deprogram? Because I do know like we're being programmed either through family, through society, through the schools that we go to. How do you work on yourself personally to like detangle all these expectations that we all put?
Yeah. I think, writing is a good way. And I say that as I don't consider myself at all a writer, but sitting down and giving yourself writing prompts, such as, what do I want? I mean, it seems so basic, but just, what do I want? I had to do this recently because I am a workaholic. I have always been. I dive into work. I feel uncomfortable when I'm not working like a mad person. But now I've got kids and choices. I never had choices because medical training, it's like the draft, right? You do medical school, you have a choice of where you go. But after that, you're assigned to a residency. You get a legally binding piece of paper that says where you're going. And you can make requests, but you don't necessarily get your requests. And so there's a lot of not choice making. And now that I finally at 34 years old can make choices in my life for the first time, I had to think about if I want to work 60 to 80 hours a week like I have been. And I thought I would. And when I sat down and thought about it and talked about it with my husband, I said, what am I, nuts? What am I crazy? And so I don't start work until 10 a.m. now on my private practice days. That was a recent decision and it felt insane. And oh my God, am I glad? Because I sat down and I said, what do I want? And one of the first things I wrote was to not feel frantic anymore. For me personally, medical training and the last decade, which is how long I was in medical training from medical school until I finished, was 10 years. I felt frantic. I enjoyed it. You know, I learned so much, but every day was chaos and felt like there was too much to do and too little time. And when I thought about what I wanted, I said, I don't want that. I want to work as a doctor. I want to serve my patients, but I want to be able to enjoy a cup of coffee in the morning. Like a lady. I don't know. And so I decided to do it. It means I will make less money every hour. I mean, my hourly rate is too high. I'm embarrassed to say it, so I won't. But you know, people in my field were desperately needed and we were expensive. And so every hour I don't work, I'm like, oh, you know, that could be going towards college funds for the kids or whatever. But I said, no, I am not starting till 10 a.m. I'm going to take time for myself. I'm going to exercise. So you want to sit down and be really honest with yourself about what you want your life to look like and feel no shame. You might want to burn and make as much money as possible. There's no shame in that. You might want to work part-time. There's no shame in that, right? So you want to be very honest about what it is that would make you feel fulfilled. Because again, no one's high-fiving you on your deathbed. I've seen lots of people on their deathbed. I know exactly what it looks like. And you just want to do what makes sense for you.
Okay, perfect. There's another question here from Dami. Dami, I don't know if you want to ask it directly, but I'll at least say out what you've typed, and then you can add on if you need. Linda, what are the typical key indicators of when an initially motivated individual starts to lose motivation? And what techniques could one use to get remotivated?
That's a good question. And Dami, do you want to add anything to that before I tackle that?
No, please go ahead. I have a follow-up question.
Okay.
So I'll let you answer that first.
Yeah. So, you know, losing motivation will obviously occur on a spectrum. I would say the extreme end of the spectrum would be actual burnout, where, you know, you stop being interested, you start feeling bad about yourself, you feel exhaustion. There's a lot of symptoms of burnout. It's an actual syndrome. We make everything a syndrome in medicine, but there is a burnout syndrome and you can look it up. But, you know, before you get to burnout, there would just be kind of the loss of motivation, loss of meaning. So I think, you know, the signs that that's happening are that you feel less motivated. Maybe you're not doing what you set out to do. Maybe you're not feeling joy from doing the things that, you know, would normally be joyful for you or that you've set out to do. I'd say, you know, before you even work on tackling, you know, quote unquote, fixing that, I would check in with yourself to wonder why it's happening, which again, I think harkens back to what we just discussed, as in, are you just tired? Like, is something else getting in the way? Is it the wrong time? Are you setting goals that are too big and you don't feel that you're achieving, so you're feeling less and less motivated? Or do you not actually want to do the thing? If you think you actually want to do the thing, then one of the ways I advise to deal with starting to feel burnt out and less motivated is actually taking a break, which might be counterintuitive. Stop. This is something that I'm trained as a sex therapist in addition to regular therapy, which always makes everyone go, yo, like, what is that? I told my parents, my mom goes, what? You're doing what? I said, you know, I'm not having sex with patients, Mom. Sex therapy is where you help people with sexual problems. And one of the most common sexual problems are couples where maybe one partner doesn't have as high of a drive as the other. And so it's a constant kind of battle and source of stress. And they come to you for help. They want more of a sex drive. And one of the first things we prescribe is that they're not allowed to have sex anymore. You say, we're taking a month off. And you might say, you know, it works. It is very helpful when you turn to the person with no drive and you say, you're not allowed to have sex anymore. It's like kind of basic reverse psychology. When you are pressuring yourself and pressuring yourself and pressuring yourself to do something, it can be too much. So when you do the opposite, when you say, you can't write this month, nani, you can't write. By the end of the month, you're probably going to be going, give me that pen. Give me the pen. You know, it might not work, but it often does. So if you're starting to feel burnt down and not motivated, you don't have to take a month off. You can take a week off and you require it. You don't say, well, I'll do less this week. No. You'll do nothing this week. Nothing towards that goal. It works.
Nice. Thanks.
Yeah.
Any follow-up?
Nice. Thank you. Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Thank you, and thank you for sharing your story. And it's pretty interesting and fascinating.
Yeah.
One of the things I learned from this is the validation of speaking one's truth,
Yeah.
and it's just being very aware of oneself and owning it. One of the techniques I use for motivation is positive self-speak. I'm curious whether there's any scientific research that backs that up into being able to achieve and power through a whole bunch of things.
Heck yeah. I love being a child psychiatrist. Adults are just giant toddlers. We actually don't change from when we're toddlers. We just learn to shut our mouths. But when people ask me why I went into child psychiatry, I said, well, when a kid comes into the office and they start ripping everything off the walls and they take off their pants and piss on the floor and just look at you, I think, I know, right? Right. So we've all had this, we have the same feelings. You control our behavior, right? If a kid does that, you go, I get it, that kind of day, huh? Right. Like we all have had days like that, but now we know not to take off our pants, right? So, what a very evidence-based method we use with kids and with adults, parents of kids, where the kids are being oppositional or having a hard time, is positive talk, positive parenting. So instead of focusing on the negative, instead of giving attention to the negative, which actually reinforces negative behavior because the kid wants attention, you ignore the negative and you catch kids being good, which is very hard for parents. We always, stop doing that. Don't hit your brother. Don't do whatever. So instead, you have to say, when the kid's sitting quietly and playing, and you would otherwise be going, oh my God, thank God, I get a second. You turn and say, wow, Susie, you are playing so nicely. I love how you are, it takes practice to catch kids being good. It takes even more practice to catch ourselves being good. So yes, positive self-talk, even if you don't meet your whole goal, if you say, Linda, you sat down today and you at least made some of the paperwork you need for your new practice that's driving you crazy, right? You good job. I can do this. I am good. Yes, that's very evidence-based. So talk to yourself as if you like yourself, or maybe like you love yourself and like you're proud of yourself. That's what parents do. We have to kind of do it to ourselves when our parents aren't sitting there to do it.
Yeah. The mirror is one of my best friends, apparently.
Yeah. And I will add, I refer to parents. I now, through my training, know how privileged I was to have parents who were adequate, right? I mean, I think my parents were great, but they were adequate. You just need good enough parents to kind of end up with a good concept of yourself. Parents who told you, who seemed like they liked you sometimes and, provided for you and whatever. Not everybody has that. So if anybody comes from an abusive background, even emotionally abusive, that is all the more reason to put more work into teaching yourself to talk well to yourself, because your conscience is actually your parents' voice. No one realizes that. It is a process that occurs in a very obvious way around ages 2 to 3, where 2-year-olds and young 3-year-olds, when they're starting to develop a conscience, you'll hear them saying out loud the things the parent would say. I watched my own kid do it, and I learned about this in training. So when he was 2 and he would get up and stand on a chair, he would say, that's dangerous. You shouldn't do that. And not to us. He would kind of say it to himself. And if he was making a mess, he'd go, this is a big mess, but it's okay to make a mess, which is what we always say to him. It's okay to make a mess if he spills, if whatever. And then eventually you see them mouthing it to themselves, but not saying it out loud. Okay. And then eventually it disappears. You don't see them saying anything, but you see them thinking, and that is the conscience. So conscience formation is literally the parent's voice. And if you have good enough parents, then you end up with a nice, healthy conscience and you speak to yourself in an okay way. If you have abusive parents, then you end up with a conscience that says, you're a piece of shit. You're never going to finish this project. You're never going to amount to anything. And I wish abuse were less common, but it's incredibly common everywhere. And abuse is independent of, socioeconomic status. It's more based on what people's parents did to them. We learn how to parent from our parents. And if you had abusive parents, you don't have to be abusive, but you got to get to therapy, because without therapy, you're going to repeat the cycle when you get stressed out. So yeah, positive self-talk. And if you have a tough history in terms of how people spoke to you when you were really little, that's all the more reason to work on it, to get therapy if you have therapy available, because it can be better and it makes all the difference.
Perfect. So Thank you, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. So we have like a few more minutes, 6 minutes. I don't know if anybody else has questions. Malik, Kike, anybody wants to ask Linda any questions about motivation, any projects we're working on? Yeah, any more questions here? I'll give it a. Oh,
Yeah, okay. Yeah, if no one has any other question. Hi, Linda.
Hey.
Yeah, hi, everyone. So
hey.
thanks for sharing. I think my main question is, and I just want to know if this counts as burnout, but then I think I draw a lot, and one thing I've realized is I can draw for like 7, 8 days straight and be fine, and then maybe say, okay, when I'm done with 4 drawings, I'm gonna take a break. And I take a break, and then maybe a month or two, I do the same thing.
Yeah.
I've tried or maybe you start one today, finish it in 3 days. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I think I would rather put 4 or 5 hours down to get one done and then move on.
Yeah.
But then I don't know if this still counts as burnout, but then the 7 or 8 days straight just doesn't work anymore. Not doing anything differently, still in a similar position as I was when I used to do it without any issues. But then now it's like, okay, I would dedicate maybe 1 or 2 days and then take the break. So the long stretch of like a week or so just isn't there anymore. So I don't know if it's the same in terms of burnout or if that's something else.
Does it give you this? Do you still get joy from doing it? It's just not for as long.
Yeah.
Okay. No, you're not burned out. I love to share the fun fact with people. I don't know how old everybody is here. I won't ask. But your brain is very actively physically still growing and changing until you're 25. And after that, you're still making all sorts of new connections and synapses. Like our brains are always changing. So that's not burnout. You've just changed. And change doesn't have to be bad. It's like I said, in college, I don't know what was going on with my brain, but I was a beast. I had a little research office in the library that they gave to me, and I would sit there and burn from 7 in the morning on a Saturday until 11 at night. I would just go. I couldn't do that now, but I don't need to, right? I know that now I have some prime time hours, maybe 7 to 10 a.m. I'm a real morning person. That's when I rage. And after that, the rest of the day is basically a waste. So I don't waste my time with the rest of the day. So if for you now can do a day or two and you are productive and you do something and it feels good and you don't want to do the next 6 days, great. That's just who you are now in this season. And that's fine. It's just, we change, our brains change throughout life. And that's where the self-acceptance comes in. You say, okay, now this is what I do. I guess it looks different.
All right. Yeah, thanks.
Of course. You roll with it and schedule around that. Don't push yourself to be a way that you're not now.
Yeah, I think, just to wrap it up, one thing I heard, when people are always asking, what's your routine? What did it, sometimes routine just sounds so fixed that, it's more of like, what's your rhythm? If your rhythm is three times a week and then chilling for the rest of the month, then just be cool with that without that being a fixed routine. So thanks for sharing. I think everybody's done with their questions. Linda, thank you very, very much for, I know you're a very busy woman. You have your so many things going on, but you took the time to come hang with us today. And I really, really appreciate that. So thank you very much. And I will be sending the recording to you. You can use it as you please. And thank you to everyone that joined. I hope you were inspired. I hope you got a dose of motivation. And thanks.
Thank you guys for having me. And yeah, love yourselves, accept yourselves. Whatever you're doing is perfect. Whatever you're doing is right. All right.
Thank you. This was awesome.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So nice to meet all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Take care, guys.
All right. Y'all have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.